Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm Kelly Hallman, Senior Associate at the Population Council. Welcome to Retooling Adolescent Girls Programming, Resources for Intentional Design. Over the next 90 minutes, you'll hear from me, my colleagues at the Council, Restless Development, and the Women's Refugee Commission as we share our experiences in Tanzania and Sierra Leone using tools that collect new data in a participatory manner with off-track girls and young women. In many parts of the world, when girls reach puberty, they're pulled from school, socially isolated, forced to marry, and bear children early, are at greater risk of sexual violence and sexually transmitted infections, including HIV. While programs exist to reduce these vulnerabilities, they often miss their mark. They either fail to reach the most vulnerable girls, they reach them too late, or they do not address the life circumstances that have put them at risk in the first place. This webinar will showcase tools and resources programmers can use to ensure that they are reaching the right girls with the right interventions and at the right moment. The resources you'll hear about are based on many years of rigorous research on what works to reach girls and young women, reduce their risk of negative outcomes, and help them chart a safe transition to adulthood. Many thanks to my collaborators at Restless Development and the Women's Refugee Commission for partnering to make this webinar happen. Let me introduce our program of speakers. First, you'll hear from me about the Girl Roster and the ASSERT, the Ascertaining Sexual Relationship Types tool. Then you will hear from Dawn Humphreys from Restless Development, who is based in London but has worked in Tanzania and used the Girl Roster. Then we'll hear from Omar Robles, Senior Program Officer, Adolescents in Emergencies at the Women's Refugee Commission. He'll describe the I'm Here approach that has been used in many emergency settings. Cherno Ba, Associate at the Population Council, and Judith Bruce, a Senior Associate at the Pop Council, will briefly share their experiences in Sierra Leone and some more broad perspectives as well. Then we'll have 30 minutes for Q&A. A few housekeeping items before we begin. We'll have about an hour of presentations, and we'll hold questions until the end, and we'll have about 30 minutes for questions. The lines will be muted throughout the presentations. If you have questions during the presentation, you can send them to the email pubinfo@popcouncil.org, and we'll raise them at the end. During the Q&A, you can ask questions in 3 different ways. You can send a chat to the Population Council host. You can send an email to the same address I just mentioned, pubinfo@popcouncil.org, or you can raise your hand using the webinar tools that are on your screen. We're recording this webinar, and we'll post it on the Council's website and circulate the URL to all participants afterwards. And lastly, don't forget to join the conversation on social media. We're using the hashtag Girl-Centered Programs, all one word. Okay? So, to begin, I want to describe a little bit about the Girl Roster tool as well as the ASSERT tool. We face a problem in doing girls programming, especially the poorest girls in the poorest communities are often not reached with programming that is allegedly designed for them. They're really the key to addressing the different development goals, but they're really not the ones being reached by programming. Without intentional recruitment, these girls receive a very low and even negligible share of the benefits of potential programs, and without intentional practices, programs do not reach these girls who are most in need. And the resulting effect is elite capture. What is elite capture? Programs unintentionally attract girls who are well off and on track. In other words, the girls who would walk through the door of a program anyway without any special targeting or recruitment. Activities that often result in elite capture include some of the following: written materials when girls are actually not able to read very well, school-based programs that exclude out-of-school girls, holding sessions at times when girls or who have children or who have younger siblings cannot actually participate because they're busy with domestic responsibilities. And also, recruitment using long and complex interviews can actually exclude girls who are not allowed to speak to outsiders. They're the ones who are invisible within their homes, within the community, etc. What is the girl roster? The girl roster is a 7 to 10 minute questionnaire given to female adults within households using non-sensitive questions. It's administered by pairs of female program staff to every local household in a community using Android phones. Girls go in pairs to do the interviews for safety as well as for bringing a presence about female enumerators in the community. It's a user-friendly device, easy to implement on the Android phones. It takes 4 to 5 days per community to complete. It provides immediate evidence for programming for targeting girls who should be at the center of programs. Example questions that are given to the adult female within each household: how many girls aged 6 to 17 live in this household? And then for each girl within the age range, what is her age? Is she attending school or not? If she is, at what grade level is she studying? How is the girl related to you? Because often girls can be living with someone who's actually not her parent. She can be a domestic worker. So it's important to try to ask about all girls, even if they're not actually related to the household head. Does this girl have any children? And is she married or engaged? How does the girl roster help? Program implementers can see the local universe of girls in the program catchment areas. Even programmers who live in a particular community, who are from that community, often do not see girls who are invisible within that community. So it's really important to go house to house to ask these questions. It helps define meaningful segments of girls according to the key demographic characteristics that are contained in the questions that I just mentioned, including the girl's age, her schooling and marital status, her childbearing status, as well as her living arrangements. It serves as a rapid response tool to identify key populations of girls within the community. And through appropriate community engagement, the tool increases girls' access to a fair share of community resources delivered in a meaningful way. Where has it been used? My colleagues throughout the webinar this morning will describe some of the settings it has been used in. This is a list. You can see it has been used in many, many countries, and it's also been used in a variety of settings, including rural, urban, military, refugee, and emergency settings. And inevitably, there's always something new to learn. As I said, even people who are from that local community are usually surprised by the results. The diversity of girls is much more vast than most of them actually expect. Why focus on girls and their communities? The rights and services promised with high political visibility to girls do not often translate into benefits for girls unless they're intentionally identified and reached. Services must be physically accessible to girls. Girls need to be able to walk to services. And girls' walkable communities are actually much smaller than boys' walkable communities. This is a map from a study that I led in South Africa where we interviewed girls who were age 11 and 12, as well as boys the same age. And then we interviewed an older group of boys and girls separately. So we had 4 different groups, 2 genders, 2 age groups. And what we found is that for boys, as they get older, their walkable community actually expands. So opportunities get bigger for boys as they go into adulthood. Whereas for girls, at age 11 and 12, their area was similar to what the boys' area was at age 11 and 12. You can see the yellow versus the blue. However, as girls get older, as they reach puberty and they become more sexually defined by their peers and the community, their walkable community actually shrinks. They're less able to navigate the community, to walk to services, to access different types of opportunities. So this is a really important point in terms of programming for girls. They need to be able to physically get there. What are some segments of girls that are typically defined after the girl roster results have come in? So these often include school-age girls who are not in school, or school-age girls who are significantly behind grade for age, often behind 2 grades or more for their age. Girls who are socially isolated, aged 8 to 15, living apart from parents or not in school. Girls who are married before the age of 18, as well as girls who have young children. And they can also be any combination of these items that I just listed. Okay, this is an example of a girl roster exercise that was done by my colleague Omar, who's going to be speaking later in the webinar. And basically what you can see here is that of the 291 girls total that were reached in this exercise, many of them are in fact off track, quote unquote. They're either out of school when they should be in school, they are living with one or neither parent, or they have a child, or they're married. And so there are many combinations of vulnerabilities or being off track that girls can experience, and this really puts them at a disadvantage in terms of being able to access programs. Okay, now turning to another tool that we've recently developed and used, the ASSERT tool, Ascertaining Sexual Relationship Types. The reason I created this tool with partners in Tanzania, UNICEF and Restless Development were partners here, is that the HIV epidemic, we're making progress with ARTs and other types of advances. However, girls are still being left behind. The ratio of HIV prevalence for young people in sub-Saharan Africa, it is much, much, much heavier for girls than it is for boys, 2 to 4 times, even higher than that in some countries. Prevention approaches assume that young women have relative equality, agency, and power in sexual relationships. They often do not. And for girls, we have evidence in the literature about why girls are having different types of sexual relationships. There have been some recent review studies come out and describe some of those motivations and how they're characterized. However, there's still a vast lack of evidence on who girls are actually having sex with. The conventional wisdom is that this is a boyfriend or a sugar daddy, but we really thought that there was something in addition to these 2 conventional types of partners that are normally described. And so ASSERT is an anonymous group-based reporting method. It's applied with pre-existing groups of mutually trusted individuals. This needs to be not strangers thrown into a room together, but people who know each other and who can talk honestly with one another. It's not designed to elicit individual experiences or behaviors. It's about types of groups in a community. So in this case, it was girls like you that we asked, not you, but girls like you in this community. And that enables the girls to speak more forthrightly about what is actually happening in their communities if it's not their own experiences that they're having to describe. So it identifies a range of sexual partners, and we also talked about why they have each type of sexual partner. And the methodology uses listing and ranking methods. So what we found in Tanzania with the young women, we interviewed 6 different groups of young women who are between the ages of 15 and 24, all of them out of school. And what we found is they described 13 distinct types of sexual partners that they had relationships with. Boyfriends were mentioned by most of the groups, and the other type of partner mentioned by most of the groups was men over age 40. A variety of other partners were listed by between 2 and 5 groups. Those included age-disparate partners, 8 different types of age-disparate partners that you can see in the orange box. Those include things like a local doctor, the teacher, bosses, men, those are men who have businesses, the taxi driver, et cetera. So there are a lot of different types of age-disparate partners girls have. In terms of same-age partners, Besides the boyfriend, there are sexual side partners, dancers, classmates. These were girls who were in vocational training, not in school. And then this person called the neat boy, who dresses well and smells good and is attractive to girls. So what this slide shows is that of the 13 different types of partners that the girls articulated in both urban and rural settings in Tanzania, the programming that we currently have in the region, on the continent, often gets at, it targets the types of partners who are same-age partners. It looks at boyfriends, classmates, men that girls have interactions with on a daily basis in their daily life, but it doesn't really get at the partners who are age disparate mainly, and who girls really go to for socioeconomic and structural issues that they're facing. And so this shows that HIV risk is highest among those age disparate partners that programs do not normally reach. So what are the implications of the findings from Tanzania for a CERT? So we need to refine HIV prevention strategies to address both of the following points. First, we need to address challenges faced by girls that encourage them to have sexual activity with particular types of partners. These are mainly age disparate partners, and the reasons girls said they had relationships with them included inability to pay their house rent, a lack of safe, affordable transportation from point A to B, financial costs, queuing time, and low-quality health care was the reason they had relationships with doctors. And we also need to address the behaviors of particular types of the male partners that these girls named. So those include taxi drivers, doctors, teachers, men over age 40, and some of these men can actually be reached through things like professional associations, labor unions. Taxi drivers, doctors, and teachers certainly can, because they're all part of different professional associations, and HIV prevention campaigns can very easily be targeted to those. Men over age 40, perhaps instead of the traditional sort of shaming intervention that we know about, there could be other things that could be done, including encouraging these men to display their wealth and importance in alternative ways, such as sponsoring sports clubs, having local buildings or facilities named after them. So basically a way that they can say they're important besides having girlfriends. Okay, you can learn more about the tools using the following URLs that we have here, and those will be available when we send the slides to you after the webinar, so don't feel as if you have to hurriedly jot these down. They'll be available to you. And so now I want to turn over to John Humphreys, who is with Russell's Development, and who will describe the Girl Roster experience that they have had in Tanzania.
Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for that. Kelly, that was great. I'm just setting up my screen. Okay. Cool. So thank you very much to everyone for joining us today, and thank you to the Population Council for hosting us and kicking off the presentation this morning. So yeah, my name is John Humphreys. I work for Russell's Development as the Program Support Coordinator. Based in London, I support our in-country teams in running their programs. I'm actually presenting today on behalf of Gerla Shabani, our monitoring and reporting coordinator in Tanzania, who was unable to connect, unfortunately. But to put this I worked with Gerla on putting this presentation together, and Gerla was able to go out and speak to our volunteers in the communities who use these tools, to understand their experience and how they found it, and has looked at how it's affected and enhanced our girl-focused programming in Russell's Development Tanzania. And so I hope this gives insight to other programmers who are looking to better reach girls. There's a little bit of background on Russell's Development for those who may not know. We are a global agency run out of strategic hubs in 10 countries across Africa, Asia, and in the UK and the USA, with a wider network of partners across the world. We work to make sure that young people have a voice, a living sexual rights, and are leaders in preventing and solving the world's challenges. Restless Development has been working with young people since 1985, and its work is led by thousands of young people every year. We listen to young people, our work is led by young people, and together we help young people making lasting change in their community. So to begin with a little bit, just giving a background on the projects that we use the roster tool on that I'm going to speak specifically about. The Mabinti, Tushike, Hatamu project is a scalable and cost-effective model which engages after-school adolescent girls, originally aged between 10 and 19 years, to empower them to make safe choices regarding their sexual reproductive health and rights, economic and social well-being, and ultimately contributing to reduced vulnerability to HIV, pregnancy, and gender-based violence. The project runs both in rural and urban Tanzania, where the rural districts we've been working in between 500 and 800 kilometers from Dar. And these primarily rural areas have some of Tanzania's highest rates of HIV prevalence. In August 2016, we increased the age bracket to include girls aged 10 to 24 off the back of using these tools, recognizing the need for knowledge and information to make informed decisions as girls and young women transition into adulthood, and how that phase can often be ongoing depending on the context that we're working in. Young people are the main implementers of the project. We recruited 27 community volunteers and 9 national volunteers who lead the peer education sessions in information resource centers at the identified safe spaces, and run activities such as the listenership program. So just to give you an idea of the kind of activities happening on this project, this is centered around 12 8-minute radio episodes that the girls come together in their respective groups to listen to as a group, and covering topics such as challenges, friendships, the issues around SRH and economic challenges they come up against. And then there's a group facilitated discussion afterwards led by the volunteers who are working on the program. Okay, so just to run through some of the key successes that have been identified by those using the tools and working on the program. To start with, there are 6 I'm going to highlight particularly, but the participatory tools were developed, as mentioned, in partnership with the Population Council to identify important aspects of the girls' local communities, including the safe and unsafe areas, and identifying trusted community members. The girl leaders received training and conducted the research within their communities among their fellow girls. The participatory research informed interventions, core programming changes that needed to be taken into account. And these are starting with access to information. So the thorough mapping of individuals and civil society organizations who were providing services and supporting girls programs was information that we did not know before, particularly in these rural areas. And as you kind of find out the more informal, sort of individually run services, it was great to get a thorough mapping understanding of those. It gave us the research and information we needed to inform our programming in a way that we didn't have before, both in the speed of being able to lead and do it ourselves, but also the detail of information that we were able to capture. Often when kind of planning these programs and working with national level or even district level information, it just doesn't have this kind of detail and what you need to be able to disaggregate properly and then inform your programming. Secondly, it enabled us to reach more young girls through knowing the specific reasons and factors that led them to high-risk situations. The tool encouraged girls to open up to us and meant that we could reach girls on an individual case and not just through a group setting. Where that was, groups were always going to be the core of the activities that we ran through our community-led our community volunteers who were leading the research and the activities. They were able to reach individual girls who wouldn't necessarily have felt comfortable coming to a group setting. And this leads us on to talking about group formation. So before the implementation of the tool, girls were only being grouped through age, and we were seeing the number of girls in groups going down. So the tool helped us to strengthen this process by understanding their individual needs and then reforming the groups as a result of that. An example of this it can be kind of seen played out in the photograph there on the screen. You see a young woman holding her child, and through this added level of understanding the kind of the household these young girls are coming from and their personal circumstances, we were able to identify that we needed to have a separate group for young women and girls who have children. For example, girls were more reluctant to discuss issues in a group where there was a mother, and vice versa, but also we saw parents not wanting their children to necessarily continue with activities if it involved being in a group where there was a girl who was unmarried with a child. It also informed activity design. So through the tool, we're able to better understand the girls' needs, as I've said, and where we might have in the past used just a pre-designed manual, which we have worked like hard on, but what this gave us was that elevated understanding to know the specific context. So it equipped our volunteers who are leading this work to be able to adjust and become much more skilled in delivering this, so identifying when more time needed to be spent on one issue because they had that in-depth knowledge about the individuals who were in their group. Relationship building. The tool has helped us to strengthen our approach to working with girls. So not just waiting for them to come and join the groups, but the tool allowed us to better reach them in their home places, got the opportunity through that interaction to meet their parents and guardians and get their views on the program and how it can be improved, and really contributed to the sensitization work that needs to happen when introducing a new project into an area. Currently, we've managed to make visitations to 270 girls' households in Dar es Salaam and in the rural Iringa area. And it really has elevated that knowledge about the individual homes and background of the young girls that we're reaching. And then finally, just a comment around gender-based violence cases. So we discovered more of these as a result of the tool, mapping those databases and understanding the available support and services that are there in these rural areas for young women and girls meant that we were able to better signpost young girls who came forward with these cases, and all this running alongside, as I've mentioned, that kind of strong relationship forming meant that girls were able to get to the point where they could be more forthcoming with these sorts of cases. Okay, so just to kind of touch on some of the challenges or issues to consider when using this tool. There's at a very practical level, just sort of access to technology, and the tool works on an Android phone, and making sure that the volunteers had readily charged, access to that kind of basic stuff of being able to reach the phone. The interesting lesson around those collecting the data that the volunteers observed that it was best to have two people to use the tool effectively. So one to ask the probing kind of deeper questions, and the other to feed the information into the phone. But recognizing that actually that sometimes, while that was the best option, didn't always work when considering the comfort of the person being interviewed, and that two-on-one scenario is not always ideal, and just the physical logistics to consider in getting two volunteers to educators to a very rural area at the same time, and kind of considering all that. So just kind of bearing that in mind should you come to use this in the future. And then to just kind of end on a bit of what next and what our hopes are for the tools and where we're at now. Definitely want to continue using these tools and take these learnings that we've kind of got from using them so far and apply them to our other projects, and also expand the use of the tool to other girls-led projects. And it'd be interesting to have discussions around this approach being tailored to reach other marginalized groups as well. The tool reinforces and provides evidence in the value of engaging with young people as partners, and the information young people collected told us accurately what they were experiencing in life, and for us to use this information to create better approaches to reach them, and that really is applicable across all our work. I've added, like, we've got a website there at the bottom. Gurlez, who, as I said, is the team member who led this piece of work in Tanzania, his contact details, and then my own as well. But yeah, thank you very much for your time, and I'm going to really smoothly hand you back.
Great. Thank you, Dawn, so very much. And thanks to Gurlace for putting together the slides and doing the work as well. So it's great. We'll turn it over now to Omar Robles with the Women's Refugee Commission.
Thank you, Kelly. And thanks, Dawn, for that presentation. And thanks, everyone, for making the time to participate here on this webinar. I want to extend that same thank you to the POP Council for convening this event and for basically being at the forefront of shifting practice about how we reach adolescent girls in this overlooked population, a population that has so much capacity and that is often overlooked. And if it's one thing I would like to start this presentation with is by letting everyone know on the call that it's possible. I don't know, as if you were listening to Kelly speak or to Dawn share Restless Development's experience, I was thinking back and reflecting on 3.5 years ago when I first came across the girl roster in a brief presentation that Judith was present for and other persons at the POP Council, Sophie Suarez, Craig Savell, Cherno, Dana Smiles. It was a group of people really pushing forward that we could do better. And I thought to myself, is it possible? Is it possible to apply, to adapt, to do better for adolescent girls with this tool and then in humanitarian settings? And what I'd like to share with everyone on the call right now is that it is possible. And to share a few stories and a few examples of how those possibilities of what intentionality looks like, what it means to be more purposeful, what it means to be proactive in reaching adolescent girls looks like in the humanitarian context. And I do look forward to fielding questions at the end. That it's possible, though, isn't just something that we at the Women's Refugee Commission that are a research and advocacy organization and firmly believe that crisis, when they displace girls from their home, leave them at a great disadvantage, and they're being displaced in greater numbers than they ever have been before. I mean, in humanitarian context, I think it's important to realize that sometimes parents themselves rely on coping strategies that isolate their daughters within their homes. I mean, shielding them from real-life threats, but also from the friends and the programs that could benefit them. Not to mention the protection risks that they face. So a group of organizations, not just the Women's Refugee Commission, have come together, spearheaded as well by a co-founder of the Population Council, to form a Girls in Emergencies Collaborative. This is a coalition of the willing, the coalition of action, that have really come together around 3 urgent and doable actions. I'd like to share those 3 urgent and doable actions and then ask, my first ask of everyone on the webinar, if these actions resonate, if what you have heard and or hear and your agency works in a humanitarian context. I encourage you to reach out. We have quarterly calls. We'd love to hear from you, learn from your experiences, see what those synergies are. We are driven towards these goals, and they are: 1, to identify and gather critical information about girls in the earliest days of an emergency when risks may be highest. 2, to develop visible and specific mechanisms that connect girls to basic needs, services, and logistical support. Herein, certain resources such as the Girl Roster, the I'm Here approach, a series of steps, training materials, etc., have been developed. And then to engage girls in the relief and recovery process. They themselves have the capacity, right, that we need to tap into that potential and recognize that their insights are valuable. So it's giecollaborative@gmail.com. To all the colleagues that you see their logos there, a special shout out. And these are the different areas where we've had either some learning or some application of the Girl Roster, the I'm Here approach take place as well. And then none of this is possible, colleagues, without field teams. To the extent that the work of the Girl Roster, of I'm Here implementation, relies on field teams, this is an example of a field team in Turkey, made up of both men and women, displaced persons, Syrians and Turkish, a very diverse group who were at the forefront of the type of innovation and change as humanitarians, as members of the displaced community. They're actually doing the work that we described. So at the Women's Refugee Commission, we know that the starting line is not the same. It's not the same for every adolescent girl. It's not the same for girls relative to men, relative to older women. And oftentimes when we have this discussion in the field, practitioners will share an understanding of the fact that the starting line is not the same. They might even suggest and infer that they know girls are in a perpetual state of an emergency, affected by so many negative health outcomes, social isolation, et cetera, before an emergency happens. They will also say, A, what can I do about it? And B, to some extent, an iteration of, well, our services are available for everyone. We don't discriminate. And here, what I'd like to say is that we're not talking about, when we say intentional design or intentionality, it's not that we actively discriminate against adolescent girls or certain specific subpopulations. It's that we need to follow a series of constructive and informed steps to make sure that the different subgroups of adolescent girls, those that in parlance from Pop Council, off-track girls, are able to access existing programs and services that would benefit them. What does that mean in practice? So in South Sudan, I had an opportunity when we first piloted the I'm Here approach and the application of the girl roster in a humanitarian context. I met this young girl, Akesh. Now, Akesh had a huge, as you can see, smile on her face that was effervescent. She had energy that drew you to her. And Akesh also was an individual who had family support. Her mother was involved in the community committee there on the internally displaced camp in South Sudan. Her father was selling goods at the market, goods that the mother also provided, and they were both proponents of education. They recognized that displacement was affecting their daughter. And this I learned through a translator. Now, through I'm Here implementation and the use of the girl roster and reaching out and going tent to tent in this IDP camp, I later came across this young girl named Ayen. Now, Ayen, as you can see, was engaged in collecting firewood with her friend. And the way that I met her was a tap on the shoulder, and a Dinka translation was, I'm here. Where's the girl meeting? And I've told this story several times, and I'll just continue to retell it because Ayen heard through the process and the steps that the Pop Council has been advocating for and that we've infused into I'm Here, that the process of going through the girl roster opens channels and doors. It's not just the data, it's the entry point. It's making these girls like Ayen, who otherwise would not have, through your standard approach to maybe, how do you reach girls in your community? I often hear the following, and it's, well, we work through local partners, and our local partners know the community. There's bias in that approach, and there's bias in several other approaches that are standard operating procedure. But going through a series of steps made Ayen come forward, and she, in turn, actually had other groups of friends that were out of school, that were not accessing the health facility at these IDP camps. And I think, to go even further, in South Sudan in this camp, I also met Adut. Now, Adut is a teenage mom, 15 years of age. You can see her young child there. Now, the fact that there was a space for her to also come forward and to engage in a focus group discussion and to express her need for more services, not only for her child, but also for herself, with other peers who were married in this particular IDP camp, was something that came forward and came out of that implementation. So this is that camp that I was describing for those stories in South Sudan a few months after the conflict. After South Sudan, I'll just share a few different highlights. The question that we tried to see was, could it be done in a displaced setting, an urban humanitarian context? So it was implemented with Mercy Corps as a partner here in Gaziantep, Turkey. And some of the learning that emerged from this particular implementation was the need to be a bit more gender synchronized when we were using the girl roster. So we began to use a complementary module that we call the boy matrix, which are a series of questions that also capture some baseline and basic information around boys. That information was helpful for Mercy Corps that was designing a youth center to serve not just displaced populations, adolescent girls, adolescent boys from Syria, but also from the host community, and how you were going to do that in an informed and constructive manner. Other case study example here was in Lebanon, where the Danish Refugee Council has been moving forward with work, and to date, now there are 12 girl groups between Bekaa and Tripoli. It's phase 2, a year 2. They've taken learning from doing a 24-week programming cycle that responds to the needs of young adolescent girls, older adolescent girls, as well as already married girls. So based on the results from the girl roster, they've been able to modify their curricula for those 3 groups and tie in an M&E process. So year 2 has incorporated a mentorship component. So girls that finish the first year are now becoming mentors for other girls, and you're starting to begin to see these success stories emerge from this work, both in terms of changes in the assets, but also in how caregivers are beginning to view girls, their daughters, in the community. And then in Iraq, this is a few kilometers outside of Mosul with our implementation partner, Mercy Corps. Some key findings that emerged from the work in Mercy Corps was certainly the number of unaccompanied girls and boys that had made their way to this particular community called Kabat. Also learned through implementation that the area where they believed that displaced persons were living through their standard outreach to local partners was not in fact the reality on the ground. The location of the particular adolescent group, displaced adolescents and families writ large were in different areas, and that was part of the process that emerged from this. Mercy Corps since has infused the approach and modified it and adapted it for its use throughout its youth programming in Iraq from a pilot implementation. So what I'd share here, a kind of a takeaway organizationally, colleagues that are on the line, has been that learning can't necessarily, I think, the type of shift that we're looking for operationally does take some time. And if you can identify a case, an initial inroad, an initial place, you can begin to see that change when practitioners within an agency start talking and sharing their experiences with actually carrying out and using the girl roster, or implementing new ways of being more intentional to reach adolescent girls. And most recently and currently underway is I'm Here Girl Roster implementation in Yemen. An insecure place, but a place where we have a field team being led by an amazing gentleman whose sort of drive to connect with this particular community, engage the community in being the type of individuals that collect the actionable information that we're describing and talking about, has brought groups of girls together that otherwise hadn't been together for several months, even close to years, is what I've been hearing with the recent report outs. So it's possible. It's possible. What I'd like to do in closing and kind of wrapping this up here over the next few slides is, one, share that if you're interested in learning about a bit more details of the framing, some differences across now it's 8 different countries, but 6 at the time, and the 25-plus communities, I encourage you to look online for this document. I'm Here, Steps and Tools to Reach Adolescent Girls. It's on the WRC's website. There is more information there in detail about the steps and the approach that you can come sort of read at your leisure, and feel free to reach out later. Some background into the steps and the approach as I get there are how I came across the girl roster and the different series of steps and tools that make up the I'm Here approach was by reaching out and doing a series of key informant interviews, over 120 key informant interviews with different practitioners across the humanitarian sector, as well as experts such as Kelly, Judith, in the development context that have done so much to advance better programming for adolescent girls. And one of the things that emerged was certainly the desire for tools and resources to do better. But there was also a little bit of a kind of hesitation, right? A notion that, particularly in a humanitarian setting when there's a rush to respond to overwhelming need, how is it that you could both prioritize being more informed and also that pressure to take action? And that moving from abstractly understanding and comprehending that adolescent girls were at a disadvantage to actually doing something about it seemed to be a daunting gap. And one of those questions that even I myself had, and I don't know if many of you might have on the call, is, well, how does a community respond to having people ask questions? There's so many questionnaires out there. There's so much assessment fatigue taking place. So I'd like to address that just for a moment in a few slides and say that we found that approximately 65%, sometimes a little higher, somewhere between 65 and 70% of households agree and consent to answer a series of questions. We work with our partners to make sure that the introduction is done in a safe and ethical way, to make sure that every engagement is a positive one where something is left with some type of information. We also do some scenarios in terms of potential scenarios that emerge. For example, we don't speak to children. We never speak to children. We're only speaking to adults. You might ask yourself then, of that additional percent that do not respond, why don't they respond? And here's also a rough breakdown of what we've seen is that approximately 14%, 15% will just decline to participate, and that's okay. Occasionally no one's home, and then there's the other when no adult is home or a child answers the phone. When no one's home and we see that, after a pilot that a lot of households respond that no one was home, and that's what our colleagues going through and asking these questions come back, then it's about rehashing whether or not it was the appropriate time. Did we overlook? Is it the day? Is it a time? So there are different learnings and adaptations that have taken place just based on this information on day one. The other value I would say that I want to share in just a few slides is that the roster enables your field teams and your colleagues and ourselves and even myself to cross-check our assumptions. We have an activity called assumption cross-check, and oftentimes you can have colleagues share with you some top-line information about the demographic of the population that they believe lives in that community. Sometimes we've seen that practitioners, they're so surprised by the results because the sheer numbers are not in alignment with what they see in the community. They see young people running around Zatari camp. They see only adolescent boys moving and older adolescent girls sometimes collecting water at specific times, but the sheer number that stands out surprises them. Other times, it's the actual demographic age group itself. These are actual results where the field team had believed that they were going to adapt an existing curricula that was actually for an older age group. Lo and behold, in this particular community, that population and that age group, just without any other off-track category, was much younger. And that required making some adaptations and some more informed decisions about what the response was going to look like. And then I'll share with you both surprises quickly and this out of school. You can see that the numbers of girls in school living with no parent or living with just one parent really stood out to colleagues at Mercy Corps. And in part, there was a discussion around how school might be viewed as a protective mechanism in this particular context. But then when you were out of school, a lot of the significant portion of the population that was out of school was living with both parents. the numbers of married children or married girls was lower than expected. A detail to share here that's not captured in this slide is the average age of girls married between 18 to 24 skewed towards 19. So many of those girls were young and potentially married while adolescent girls themselves. Here's the approach, colleagues, and the tools. Belabor you because I already shared the document, and I hope you'll take a look at more. But I'm often asked, what's the difference between the girl roster and the approach? And to be honest, the synergies between them are so strong, both in terms of relationship and the process and the rationale behind them. But I do want to give you a visual as to where, at the Women's Refugee Commission, we sort of see the girl roster as being an invaluable, indispensable part of a series of steps that can drive forward a change in humanitarian practice. It enables us to make visible that context-specific profile of adolescent girls. What we've done over the learning is try to complement that with a boy matrix, so a module of very small set of questions around adolescent boys, as well as a series of questions that enable us to capture a little bit more detail around disabilities. We know in the humanitarian context, disability inclusion is incredibly important. And in working with other colleagues here at WRC, we've certainly wanted to make sure that the girl roster and I'm Here implementation is not the end game. It's a starting point. It's a more informed starting point. I recently heard a colleague describe it as a flashlight. It illuminates the community. You won't see everything, but you will see more than if you don't use it and if you don't apply these steps. The next step for us has also been taking information from the girl roster, the boy matrix, from the service area mapping, and holding targeted focus group discussions with those segments of adolescent girls and adolescent boys. We found that to be helpful in terms of not only programming that's tailored to the specific realities in that crisis-affected community, but also in helping to advocate and see and visualize those differences between girls and boys. What I'm sharing with you here is, if you could bear with me, the top is a plot of girls. It's their highest grade completed on the y-axis and their age on the x-axis. So age, highest grade completed. On this bottom graph, we have the same thing for boys, highest grade completed versus boys. So results from the girl roster and the boy matrix. And what we've been able to do here in these live results is be able to describe that in this community, you can actually see, if you take green as the line of entitlement, where we would expect girls and boys to be at their age if they were in school, if they were following their entitlement through their adolescence, through their childhood into adolescence. We would hope that these dots for girls and boys would in fact track along the green. And you can see in this community that girls and boys actually start a few years behind, which was a surprise to colleagues when they saw this. But what I've highlighted here is that window of opportunity, that if we're going to get ahead of when girls and boys go off, or when girls go off track in this particular area, then we really need to be thinking about how we're going to work with girls maybe as young as 9, 8 in a concerted way, because you can see visually here where they track. The size of the bubble, colleagues, is the number of girls at that age group or the number of boys. That's just one example of the type of comparative analysis as part of I'm Here implementation. And then the focus groups, we've applied Columbia University's participatory ranking methodology, which we believe is a methodology that addresses the concern around capacity and the ability to do focus groups, the ability to engage adolescents and adolescent girls as well as caregivers in a participatory, engaging manner. And a colleague sent these from Yemen here recently, just last week. And you can see girls engaging, having been brought to this first meeting, as it were. The focus group is not viewed as another assessment, so you can extract information and go elsewhere. We really work with our colleagues to make sure that this first focus group, this first convening, is a part of that next intentional step of responding to girls in this community. And most recent email came through about already linking a local NGO with adolescent girls in the community, some of whom might actually be focused here in this photo, or be in this photo. In terms of next steps, in closing, there have been some gaps. There's been sort of a need to be able to analyze the information that are collected, be able to present it in a way that helps inform decision-making moving on down the line. We've also seen that because in the humanitarian community, while girls are not a sector, right, it does take a holistic and cohesive group of actors to respond to their needs. So we're also developing a real-time monitoring tool, both that measures changes at the girl level, but also girls' access to different services and service points within the community in real time. We're hopeful that what it will allow us to do is streamline the series of steps and process and actually shorten the amount of time that practitioners feel like shorten the amount of time it takes to actually move from collecting the information and then getting into the actual program response and program design and implementation, et cetera. So that's forthcoming. We'll have field implementation and a beta version of the real-time monitoring tool and analytics dashboard probably by March. Field implementation in Mali will take place next month in February. So in closing, I am serious. So are many of our colleagues, obviously, on the Girls in Emergencies Collaborative. And I just encourage anyone who's really interested in learning more to please reach out to the POP Council. Feel free to reach out to the collaborative or reach out to me. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Kelly.
Great, Omar. Thank you so very much for that rich perspective. We're going to have just two more very short interventions now before we turn it over to Q&A. First will be Chernoba from the Population Council.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Omar, as well. Thanks for, and to Dawn as well, for all these very, very rich perspectives so far. We're just trying to get my presentation up, and then I will. Brilliant. So, to pick up from what Omar was saying about, I mean, two things that I was drawn to. One is the question of the possibility, and then the other one is the flashlight, as you call them. This is a map of Sierra Leone, and in this case, think about it as a group of partners, like most of you on this call thinking, is it possible not only for us to adopt this approach, evidence-based programming for girls, reaching the right girls for the right things, early enough to make a difference in the right places, I should add. And is it possible to also do it in a coordinated, concerted way? Is it possible that the tool could help us as a group of partners achieve both a community-driven approach, but also one that is aggregated at the national level to essentially constitute what Judith likes to call a national business plan for girls in Sierra Leone. And in this case, this is basically what has been happening in the country. So we have a group of organizations across the country, about 30 of them, that run programs for girls. Some of them are just advocacy programs, but a good number of them run what we call these platforms, these safe spaces for girls across the country. And they all came together with the support of governments, support of UNFPA, and with participation of UNICEF to say, how can we do this all at scale, and how can we do this with the toolkit that the Population Council brings. So what we have been doing over the past few years is to help these organizations reach this goal. And we're very proud to present this map that shows the concentration of programs across the country. Now, this achieves a few things I just want to point out very briefly. One is just a very, not only intentionality at the community level, but also intentionality with scale. Intentionality in terms of concentration of programs, intentionality as well in terms of how did the programs expand, how we experiment with different approaches and with different tools. So the Sierra Leone Adolescent Girls Network, which is what this initiative is called, as you can see here, includes, and these are spots from some of our key partners, some of our leading partners. BRAC, as you can see, BRAC has led the use of this tool in about 149 of their communities. We have Restless, which has used the tools in about 108 communities across the country. That's with the blue dots. And then you have a bunch of other of our local partners. MADCOPS, mostly in Koinadugu, way up in the north, Women in Crisis, Child Welfare, Women's Forum, and a bunch of others as well with little dots across the country. Now, the intent of this, apart from making sure that, as I said, they're all using this tool and reaching the right goals, but it's to also help them to coordinate as they go on with this program. And this is based on four key pillars that the network has identified. The first one is basically this evidence-based platform, so making sure that they're using the tools, reaching the right goals, but then it also helps them to use the right content. So the second pillar of this engagement is the non-formal life skills content. So we all coordinate some of the content that's been provided by work that the government is doing to make sure that they're using the right content to reach the right girls across the country. The next one is communications, aggregating both the voices of the girls but also the voices of the partners, and getting the right communication messages to girls so that they can elevate the work that they're doing within different communities as well at the national level. So that's separate work that's been done. The final piece that I want to point out quickly is around the use of what we've called protective and productive technologies. So a good number of these organizations have been experimenting with what kinds of technologies can we introduce that will be effective in respective communities to reach these girls and to support them with the goals that we have set aside. Now, with this approach and with these tools, it helps us as well to employ a level of intentionality in going about this program. So I just want to point out in my next slide as well, just briefly, in addition to a lot of the tables that you've seen, in each of those dots on that bigger map, we also do what is called the community resource scan, and I will not go too much into depth in this, but it also means that in each of those dots that you saw in the last map, we also have smaller maps that gives you an indication of all the basic different assets or resources that you can find in each community. That also helps us to making decisions about where we place things, about where the technologies come in, and also helps, for example, if two organizations in some cases want to be in the same place, to share this information and to think about how they can coordinate in making those decisions. So on the third pillar that I just wanted to talk about, we wanted to experiment with introduction of new technology, and the question was, where should we go? How do we make this decision, working with the partners, on which specific district, which specific community? Now, because we have this coordination, because we can see from an elevated position the entire country, we could also look at different data points. For example, if you look at during the Ebola, as you can see, this is the cumulative cases of all the Ebola virus disease in Sierra Leone. You can see that just outside of the western area and in Potloko, a little bit in the north, that there was where we had the highest concentration of cases. And there's a strong correlation between this data and obviously the profile of girls, the poverty, the more girls that are off track in these communities. If you look at this data, you'll see that Potloko is one of the most poor and isolated places, particularly for girls in the country. So, and that's also where we have a higher concentration of our partners working in Potloko. So you will see, if I come back to this map, that a good number of our partners are working up here in Potloko. So we decided, working closely with Restless Development, that this new technology, this new innovation that we wanted to test and experiment with will be situated in Potloko with Restless Development in this case. And with the network, together with the network, we have been able to experiment with this new initiative, and these pictures here, I just want to go through very quickly. At the top here, you can see the technology being installed at a resource center where the girls normally meet. As you can see, there's a restless development safe space, and we were able to, again, make these decisions based on where this technology will be safe, where other partners can have access to it, how we can take the learnings from that will benefit other partners as well, and obviously how we can benefit the girls. Now, in the middle here is the anchor of all of this initiative in Sierra Leone, a lady called Nadia Assad, who is a mechanical engineer graduate and who is our girls and technology expert. So she goes in there, she trains the girls, trains the mentors on how to use this technology and develops a system by which they can all coordinate. On the top here, you can see part of this system includes a charging station. So apart from providing electricity to the girls, apart from being a space now where the girls can come to study in the evening with the support of their mentors, they also now run a charging port. So here they can charge up to 20 different phones at the same time in this space, thereby giving them an opportunity to explore the economic asset potential of this tool. So whereas they come together, they have the social assets and the other assets that they get in the safe space, this initiative gives them the opportunity as well to begin to sell, essentially, the charging capacity here. And you can also see at the bottom here, the girls come together with their mentors after school, how they're using the space, and just the excitement of having something new, but in a very intentional and deliberate way. So finally, what the ambition is in Sierra Leone is to have that flashlight that Omar referred to and that we had in the previous map in about 360 spots, is to have that in the next few years in 1,000 spots across the country. And that's a very intentional way of essentially building the national business plan for girls in a country like Sierra Leone. So to answer Omar's question, if it's possible, I think in Sierra Leone we're seeing, with the support of all of our partners and with the support of our donors as well, that it is indeed possible and it is being done.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Cherno. We'll end the presentations with some broader perspectives presented by Judith Bruce at the Population Council.
Thank you, Kelly, and they'll be brief. And I think that the word of the day is flashlight. Thank you, Omar and colleagues, for that. The Girl Roster tool and the other tools are part of an intentional design process to allow us to literally see the girls. Think of it as a viewing exercise. So the first thing is the tools so that these, not the girl and not girls, but girls like you, which was a phrase that Kelly used. In other words, we're looking for subsets of girls, and that's important for us to see them. We often know their categories, but we don't always know their numbers. We may imagine, Omar mentioned this, that 10% of the girls are out of school, but actually it's 45%, or that the majority of girls are 15 and above, and in fact he showed that slide and that there was this overwhelming proportion of girls under 15. So the seers, the most important viewers for us, are the program people on the ground. They are the heroes of the piece. They must be given the support and capability to do this work, to feel confident they can get good enough information and make rapid decisions, test things, and refine their direction. If the people on the ground don't have those tools, it doesn't matter what we do anywhere. They are the linking points. So we must give them what they need, give them confidence in tools that are appropriate, and know that their insights are crucial. The girls on their side deserve to be seen and understand themselves not just as individuals, but part of a collective, because that's where their power is and their social capital. This map shows you where the flashlights are being used. This one is where the girl roster has been used. This then adds where in the I'm Here approach, which has focused on the not only large but increasing number of settings which are humanitarian crises, whether owing to conflict, slow health emergencies like Ebola, like HIV, fast health emergencies like Ebola, and obviously climate change. So the kinds of being able to rapidly use these tools in crisis situations will become more and more important. And then the ASSERT tool, which is the newest, helps us see, I think, with a lot more clarity, the dimensions of the sexual pressures on girls that are very closely linked, as I think Kelly's slide shows, to the economic. This is survival from a very early age, getting health care, getting to school, getting a teacher to tell you when an examination is. We have to deal with power. We have to recognize it. We have to confront it. The girls cannot do that alone. They need to be in like-situated groups. I'm very pleased that we're at this point. Last comment on scalability. People talk about this as a matter of evidence that things work. Yes, that's extremely important. When you're designing for scale, it's not just a question of using credible information, making good decisions, and being intentional and clear. And it's not just important that you demonstrate its utility in the short term to the populations of girls, that they, in a year's time, they learn they acquire assets, measurable skills. But the other feature is, if you have not brought people along with you, if you have not built capability on the ground, if you have not established partnerships, nothing is scalable. If that process is not simultaneously pursued, and this is why Council is a research organization devoted to the notion that we want to get real things to real girls in real places and not just talk about it, means that we develop tools that the field can use, and then we build partnerships and simultaneously devote ourselves to the issues of capability building. So I'm very grateful to everyone who's on the webinar, and I think we should probably turn to questions now. Enough from me.
Okay, so we have 15 minutes left for Q&A after that wonderful set of comments by Judith. Thank you. We can have questions via the chat on the webinar software, or by email, pubinfo@popcouncil.org, or you can chat with the Pop Council host. So please, come forward.
Just a reminder, you can use the hand raise function in the top right of your corner, and we will unmute the lines, and you can ask your question directly to the presenters. We still have Don Humphreys from Restless Development on the line, and Omar Robles from Women's Refugee Commission, who are unmuted and able to ask questions. One question coming in from Jenny Gamble. How many languages are the girl roster and ASSERT tools available in?
I think that we last count, something north of 13, and some local languages perhaps up to 17. We're trying to keep count, but it's been adapted and even down to Makua in Mozambique. And I think in Guatemala, they're putting it in, there are 36 indigenous languages in the areas in which we're working. So a lot of languages.
Great. Next question coming in over chat from Leanne Evanson. I'd like to understand how long the girl roster takes in terms of time to implement and train the surveyors.
That's a very good question. Thank you very much. As you know, the girl roster should be treated as not just a tool, but as I think Omar and we've all pointed out, it's an approach. So for a number of the partners that we work with, the engagement is over a period of time. But if you're looking strictly at the use of the tool, it's a very easy to use tool. As long as you have the technology, it's very easy. Our training sessions, depending on scale, depending on the size of the organization and number of people that will be using this, normally takes 2 to 3 days for us to train the partners over how to use the tool and how to basically set them up on the technical aspects of the use of the tool. But then once those are done, typically, in terms of using the tool per household, it takes about 10 to 15 minutes. Again, depending on language, depending on the skill of the rosterers, as we like to call them, per household. So depending on the size of the community, that the number of households that are within the community, it takes each household, it takes about 10 to 15 minutes to administer the questionnaire that is in the girl roster. But the training itself and the engagement itself before you can start using the girl roster takes anywhere between 2 to 3 days, and sometimes, again, depending on the partner and where they are in the understanding of the approach, it could be also up to a week.
We also had people so adept that they could be instructed literally over the phone. We have had that experience as well. And when we have training sessions, and Omar may want to jump in here, even when we just generally talk about girl programming, we just in Jordan just now, and Omar facilitated this wonderful workshop for the Girls Emergencies Collaborative, and then we went out one of the afternoons and just showed people how to enumerate on the street. Same thing in Haiti. And in Haiti, one of different teams that had been basically instructed in the morning, in the afternoon, we had among us had enumerated 300 girls already in an afternoon, and had some really interesting insights about, we saw groups of girls collecting water, and people were chasing us even to interview me. So it was also, it seemed to me, apart from generating sort of more usable quantitative information, it was like you were given a project to see girls that day. And so people came back with insights, people who worked in the community the whole time, and, oh, maybe we should engage the water seller. This was in Haiti. So I think of it as a visualization tool as well for those of you who are into mindfulness.
And the process will include not only generating the data, the information, and the automated tables that some of the examples that you saw here, but also sometimes includes supporting the partners on how you use that information. As we have said, it's only the flashlight, but the key is how do you use that to make programmatic information within the decision and programmatic system.
We've got a question from Priya. Priya, the line's open. Do you want to ask your question?
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Hi, how are you? This question is for Omar. Thank you, Omar, so much for your presentation. You talked a little bit about real-time M&E tool analytics dashboard that you were saying was forthcoming and that you would, I think, begin in March. Could you please elaborate on that tool and how you're thinking about using it?
Omar, are you?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for that question, Priya. Sure. So the implementation or the use of the tool will be a part of kind of a broader I'm Here implementation in Mali. I'm in a particular community that our operational partner Mercy Corps has identified in the northern area of Mali, and we'll do a training in Bamako with that field team. Elaborate how it's going to be used. In short, what we'd like to do is that without getting into too much of the IT details, there needs to be a secure way to store some of the information that are collected, right, via the use of mobile tools to ask the questions of different households or tents within a crisis-affected community and area. Once we identify and have results from the girl roster and the boy matrix and results from focus group discussions, which will also be inputted in a way that allow for better visualizations and analysis and analytics. We want to create a process. The dashboard and the real-time monitoring tool will allow us then to do the type of active engagement of those particular groups or girls that were identified and boys that were identified in that community. And when they come to a safe space, so it's a programming tool. It'll be a programming tool. There needs to be that intentional effort to actually do and follow through in a program. And in this case, Mercy Corps has a program that they're going to implement in this community. And when they engage the particular subgroups of off-track girls, when they come to that safe space, they'll actually have a way to sign in. It'll be an unidentifiable card, in short, and it'll be a way of being able to monitor attendance as well as their access to certain services that they might use within that crisis-affected community, and that the use of the card in much of the same way that learning from cash-based interventions in the humanitarian community have been used through tracking on mobile tools. We're trying to implement some of the learning in the safest and most ethical way possible to real-time monitoring and changes of girls' assets, their attendance, and their access to services.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Priya, I'm happy to, a side call if there's a bit more detail. It's one of those questions where I can unveil the IT or I can stay very high level, and I'm trying to navigate both. But I reference March because March will be a time where the POP Council and WRC, we have this advisory group, and we're trying to make sure that we're fusing the learning from both I'm Here as well as the Girl Roster implementation writ large. So March will be about the time when we have a better understanding of what our beta version of that dashboard and analytics looks like, and then we'll have continued learning over the next 9 months of the actual program cycle in terms of the real-time monitoring piece.
Okay. Thank you. I've got your email, so I'll reach out to you separately.
Great, Priya. Yeah, fantastic. I'd love to chat with you more.
Omar, thanks, Priya. Another question in from the web, from Zach Fowler. If we are interested in learning more about the ASSERT tool specifically, what should our next step be?
Thank you, Zach. This is Kelly. We have a collection of tools available on our website that is for intentional programming to reach off-track girls. The URL is in the slide that I presented at the end of my presentation, and you'll have that when you receive the slides, and it's up on the screen now, I believe, for you. And the ASSERT tool with instructions is there, and there are, I think, 8 or 9, 10, anyway, 10 to 15 total tools in the collection. And if you have any particular questions about using ASSERT, you should contact me. One thing that's really, really important with ASSERT is you need to have it be in a safe and private place with girls who trust one another, because it is sensitive information. And one of the things I've done that made it, I think, work a lot better is do some other participatory exercises with the group beforehand. That way they're more comfortable, they're loosened up, they're willing to talk, and don't just dive straight into the sexual partner stuff. If you want to contact me, I can share some other tools that we used as a sort of warm-up to the issues. We went from community level to the household level and then down to the sexual partner level. So building up to ASSERT is better than just jumping into it.
Another question in from the web. Can you talk about your global experience on how to support attendance while balancing the communities not wanting mentors to go to their home? This one is in from Claudia Diaz.
Can you repeat the question?
I think I add some comments on that. I think it's a really important point. It picks up on the importance of how the school is giving us that extra information. One thing I would really push here is through our model we use local community-based volunteers. So even before implementing these tools, we have an incredible resource of community volunteers who understand the area and the context and some of the issues that the young girls are already facing. So I think that kind of to start with that as your base and then adjust your programming and design accordingly would be like the first kind of consideration. And then I think looking at, as you do this mapping and understanding more of what's available in the local area, being able to kind of use those spaces and connect with them and the providers that are in those rural areas, whether they are individuals who are providing a service or very small community-based organizations, to engage with them and their experience and kind of and learn from that as well, and look at how you can be tailoring your approach from there would be my first thought. If anyone else wants to contribute to that as well.
Great, thank you, Dawn.
We've got about 5 minutes remaining. Any last questions? As a reminder, you can raise your hand or you can chat directly to the host. One question just in for turnoff. I like the sound of the business plan for girls. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I think Judith is like the she's the visionary of business plans. I mean, I think the way we think about it is, you know, the investments in girls should be seen as that. It's an investment. And the business plan for girls, the national business plan, is to think about this community investments and the programs that the respective partners are doing can aggregate into a national plan. If you think about it in two specific ways. One is the coordination and making sure that you're all being intentional about, hey, you know, what we're doing here is big. But two is to, I think Judith would say, remove it from, it's not just an emotional or kind of, you know, we're just doing this from a human rights-based perspective. This is an investment in the sense that it will actually accrue returns both for the girls but also for the country in the way you see it. So the work we're doing in Sierra Leone, the partners coming together, the platforms, the safe spaces, the technology implementation is all seen as aggregating onto something that's big and that can be done at the national level. Judith.
And I would, basically our field has to mature. And if we were talking about food security and farmers, we would know who was raising what part of the country. We would have strategies adapted to those, so seeing it as a whole. Because of the emotional appeal of the girls, people often stop there, and we're happy about your hearts, but what we need are your minds, basically. The same systematic breaking down of problems, analytics that we use for every other problem has to be applied here. And so we talk about girls, groups of girls, and so forth and so on. This is not a sentimental attachment to the girl. This is about using our very fine minds and analytics, putting them in the hands of the very bright people on the ground who are often neglected, and working with them so they understand themselves not only having a daily mission, but being part of something larger. In that way, we get a much higher value for money. I think we do better by our girls reaching higher concentrations of them. And I think we create movements and collective action. So those have to be some of the new key words, I think, that, you know, animate us.
Okay, I think we're out of time, so thank you so very much to everyone who joined the webinar. I want to remind every one of you that the Girl Roster, Assert, and other tools are available in the collection for intentional programming for girls on our website. I want to thank Omar and Dawn deeply for their very thoughtful contributions, as well as Cherno and Judith here in the room. So it was a pleasure, and have a great evening or day wherever you are.
Thank you.